Hey guys, Fro here. Welcome to this very exciting lecture. Today we're going to be talking about a very exciting topic, and that's the topic about superpowers. Can you imagine, or let me put it this way, do you have a superpower? Do you believe that each and every one of us has a superpower? Well, if the answer to that is yes, then you're correct. But if the answer is no, just follow me in this lecture today, and I hope that I can convince you that not only do you have a superpower, but you can begin to take that superpower to achieve tremendous things in your life. I'm talking about earning more money, having a more fulfilling career, having very fulfilling relationships, and being overall successful, whatever success means to you. Now, this is not the type of superpower of the Incredible Hulk or Superman or the fictional characters. No, this is real life superpower that you can take and begin implementing in your life to change your life and achieve the goals that you want to achieve. But before we dive into that, I just want to tell everybody to watch till the end. There are some tips and tricks. Not only will I talk about superpower in this lecture, but I'll also be presenting you with a lot of ways in which if you are lacking in a certain dimension of this superpower, you can take these lessons, these tips and tricks, and then go into your life so you can implement them. So watch to the end so that you can get that. I might also be doing some very exciting announcements at the end. So this will be a very great lecture. Now let's start with for this particular lecture, what we're going to start with today is a question. Actually, we should look at it this way. A question: who is mighty? So that's a question, and this question came from a poem which is about 2,000 or so years old, and I recently came across it from another internet person who published it. I think it's Tai Lopez, and he published this in one of his articles. And this is a simple question: who is mighty? And if your answer is about yourself, are you thinking, are you mighty? Who is mighty? And what does it even mean to be mighty? What does it take to be mighty? And the answer to this will really surprise you. Who is mighty? So this poem, according to that, the answer to that question of who is mighty is this answer: the person who has control over their mind. The person who has control over their mind is the person who is mighty. So let me explain. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be going around this central theme of answering this question: who is mighty? Understanding that the person who has control over their mind is the person who is mighty, and having control over your mind gives you the superpowers that we're going to talk about today. And so that superpower, it can come in the form of having control over your mind, the decisions that you can make. Other terms that you can see for that is mind control, willpower, discipline, whatever. Those all fall under the same umbrella, but it just comes down to being able to have control over your life, your mind, and the decisions that you make. And having that control ultimately determines whether or not you'll be successful or you won't be successful. So let's dive a little bit deeper here. In about the 1970s, there was a research that was done in Duke University by Terry Moffitt. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. So what Terry and her team did in that research at Duke University was they took a bunch of children who were born between 1970 and 1973. So that was the period when the research really started. So children born between 1970 and 1973 were taken as part of this research. And what they did as part of that research was they observed these children every 2 years from the age of 3 to 11. So they were observing these children every 2 years between the age of 3 to 11. And what they were looking for, and during the observation, they spoke to their parents, they spoke to their teachers, and they were getting feedback in terms of how do these children behave. And here's what the researchers were looking for, what Terry and her team was looking for. They were looking for attention. They were looking for persistence. And they were looking for impulsiveness. So attention, how attentive is this child? How attentive is this student? So that's one of the things that they really focused on. And based on that, you won't believe it, based on these three criteria: attention, persistence, and impulsiveness, those researchers came back when those children, so they went from 2 to 11, and they came back when those children were in their 30s. And they did an observation, and I'm sure you can already start predicting where this is going, right? So when they came back and they realized that the kids that did not have good attention, weren't persistent, that they don't have grit, they can't follow through things, the children that were very impulsive, that would just do things out of impulsiveness and didn't have a lot of self-control, self-control, the superpower who we're here to talk about today, those kids, when they matured, they ended up with poor health. They were more likely to be in single parents. They were more drug addicts. They had financial problems, and their criminal records were way longer than the kids that scored very well in that research. So that's a very eye-opening study, because it begins to tell us that your character, your ability to have self-control doesn't start when you are old. It occurs in children too, and by monitoring that, it has an impact in your level of success, and that should really be an eye-opener. So does this mean that these children are doomed if they don't have self-control from the get-go? No. The answer to that is no. You can actually take control of it. Whether or not at one point you're impulsive, you can actually take control of it. And we're going to talk about some of the lessons that can come out from here, and how you can, with this understanding, take this insight to change your life. So let's go into one thing. Today in media, one of the concepts with the way in which things are going and the pace in which people want everything so quickly, right? We are coming to the realization that people begin to think that their feeling is all that matters. So here we're going to talk about feelings and how it relates to this idea of the superpower with self-control. So a lot of people believe that my feelings count, and if I feel a certain way, I need to act on what I feel about. Let me explain. So imagine that it's somebody that I knew. That imagine that this guy is a friend of mine, and he had a boss who came to the job. So he had been at the job for about 5 years, and then this new boss came, and the boss did not like him at all. They did not get along. I'm sure a lot of us can relate, right? You have a boss that comes in and you guys don't get along, but you still have to work. So this guy had been at the company for 5 years. He had a couple of goals, and then he was very good with the old boss, but the old boss left, and this new guy came and just really did not get along. I mean, it was that bad. Every time he comes back and he's just complaining about one thing over another. He's not getting the right projects. He's getting overworked. He's not getting the recognition that he wants. If you can relate to that, this is what this guy was going through. So his feeling towards that boss was that of hate, was that of angst, was that of animosity. So each day he goes to work, he will just be really annoyed by this boss. Now, that was a feeling that he experienced. What could he have done? He could one day just go into the office, and the boss would tell him do this, or the boss would do something, and then he gets impulsive, and he just gets up on the table, and he just screams at the boss and tells him how it is. I mean, just like with expletives, and I mean, you can imagine how that would go, right? But if he does that, luckily this friend of mine didn't do it, but just imagine that he does that, what will happen? He probably will not have a job for very long, or immediately he wouldn't have a job. He might be on the street. He wouldn't be able to pay for his house. He might not be able to send his children to school. He might not be able to achieve the other dreams that he wants to achieve. So by having self-control over the feelings that he has, he was able to navigate the situation and achieve his goals regardless of what his feelings tell him. And so that's really that's going to be the central theme of this presentation, that feelings, a lot of people think that when they have a feeling about something, they need to act about it. And here, not so quickly. Your feelings do not count. Your feelings don't count. How you excuse me, how you feel about the situation should not dictate what you do in that situation. And I know a lot of people will be looking at this and saying, but why am I making that statement? So let's turn around here to look at a couple of things. To really succeed, based on the stories that we've seen from the study done by Terry and her team and some of the other examples that we've seen, you have to be willing to do what is right even when you don't feel like it. Doing what is right even when you don't feel like it. That is a superpower of willpower and mind control that can help you succeed. Top athletes, politicians, or anybody who has achieved any form of success, extraordinary success in their life, would tell you that there were moments when they were training and they felt like just giving up. They didn't want to do that. They were just ready to just throw in the towel and just give up. But in that moment, they did not give up. They do what is right even when they don't feel like it. Again, feeling feelings. Remember, those two are correlated. So a lot of people want to act on feelings, but you always have to understand that feelings is what can quickly get people into trouble if you just act on your feelings without necessarily stepping back and saying, what is the end goal and where are you going? And if you can understand that, you can keep your feelings aside and act based on reason. Do what is right even when you don't feel like it. So now I know you're saying, but through you're giving us a lot of ideas, you've given us some studies, you've told us to do what is right even when we don't feel like it, you've told us our feelings don't count, but then how do we go about solving that problem? Or what are the tactics, what are the lessons that we can take from this so we can apply to our life and begin to see results? So here are a couple of things or affirmations that you can take into your life to really dig deep and start building the willpower that you need to succeed. So the first one that we want to look at here is being able to think before I act. And I put it as a way that you can say it to yourself. Think before I act. I know it sounds like a cliche. A lot of people, that sounds the number of people that don't have jobs, the number of people that have lost all their money because they acted on something and then they came back to find ways to explain it, to reason on it. So when something happens, take a deep breath. And before you punch that person in their face, or before you make that investment, or before you go out eating the chocolate, or before you drink the alcohol and binge on whatever you're doing, think before you act and ask yourself, this action I'm doing, is it in alignment with the goals I want to achieve? And if you can answer that question, you are in a good position to proceed to the next step. Control temper. I know I'm going to leave some quotes probably below here in terms of temper, and that could be a whole video in itself, because impulsiveness and temper almost go hand in hand. And so people who tend to be impulsive don't control their temper, and if you cannot control your temper, you really can get into a lot of trouble and not have the superpowers that we're talking about here today. The next piece is respect for others. That sounds pretty obvious. Not just respect for others, but respect for others' property. So if you have that at the back of your mind, almost like the biblical saying that do unto others what you want them to do unto you, right? If you respect others, they're going to respect you. But if you go around not respecting others, guess what? It's going to come back to you. If you're not respecting others' properties, when they are watching you and when they're not watching you, no, believe me or not, karma goes around, it's going to come back to you. So always have this at the back of your mind, respecting others. Sit still and be quiet. The world today doesn't even give us a chance to practice this, to be able to sit still and be quiet. The mindset of meditation, the more kind of stoic mindset, that's something that even I myself, I struggle with. But to really get and build this superpower of mind control, of self-control, of willpower, of having grit, you have to develop that habit of taking the phone and putting aside, sitting still, taking a moment of silence. Let your mind wander. Don't fight your thoughts. And that's something that you have to practice. You know, I wrote an article a couple of years back about the idea of being quiet. Guess what? When something tragic happens, right, we don't go to the ceremony and say, guess what? Well, so and so just passed away. Let's just have a moment of noise. Yay, right? That doesn't happen. Right? What happens is a very solemn experience, and people have a moment of silence to reflect, because you cannot reflect and go deep in terms of developing that willpower if it's all noisy. So being able to sit still and be quiet is key. You can also call that meditation. And then build healthy habits. Build habits that will help you succeed in terms of being able to not just have willpower, but to maintain willpower. And I'm going to talk about this and recommend a couple of books about willpower. There are a lot of books that go into this, and I might leave some of them in the links below, about how to build healthy habits and how to maintain those habits to develop a very strong willpower. And then delay gratification. That goes into impulsiveness. People who don't delay gratification rarely develop this superpower of having a strong mind. And without a strong mind, you cannot achieve the goals you want to achieve in life. Let's look at some science behind this. There's a lot of research that has been done around people who delay gratification and the correlation that has to their level of success in life. So I think back in the 70s, there was a research that was done. I'm not quite sure in what institution, but it was called the Marshmallow Test by Walter Walter Mischel. So he did this research where he took a bunch of kids and he put them in a room and he gave them marshmallow. So for those kids, he brought them in the room and he said, hey, here is some marshmallow on the table, one marshmallow on the table. You can eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait a couple of minutes or so, you will get 2 marshmallows to eat. So what they did was they took those kids, they put them in the room, and they put the marshmallow in front of them. And the researchers left. And when they came back, they noticed some of the children could not control themselves. And immediately as they left, they wanted the marshmallow and they just ate it. And some of the kids understood that there is a reward to be had, a bigger reward to be had, if they could be patient and wait the allotted time, so that when the researchers come back, they get 2 marshmallows instead of 1. So some kids were impulsive, they ate the marshmallows very quickly, and some were patient, some had more mind control, some had more willpower, some had more discipline, so that they waited for the researchers to come back, and they had 2 marshmallows instead of 1. Now, what can we take away from this lesson? A lot of things to be taken from the lessons, and it kind of correlates into this same study that was done here, because the ones that were impulsive, when they studied them down the line in terms of how they fared in their life, in their career, in their relationships, again, same pattern occurs. The ones without willpower had poor health, single parents with more drug addicts, financial problems, had more court records, and just a whole suite of problems. So it really tells us that having willpower is something that has a lot of correlation to your success in life. And to be successful, you want to develop that skill and that mindset of having a strong willpower. So the marshmallow test, something very interesting. I might leave the link below, so check out for that. Now, with this marshmallow test, what does that mean for you? How can you take this and put it into your life so that you can start seeing results from all these ideas, to have a strong willpower, to have a strong mindset, so that no matter what is happening in your life around you and all the distractions that are going on, you stay focused on your goals? Because the moment you lose focus and get distracted or become impulsive, that's the moment where things start going downhill. So to do that, let's understand the brain. And the brain, it's a very complex organ in the body, one of the most complex organs. As you're watching this video, you're using your brain. So in the front side of the brain, there is something called the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, in the front side of the brain. And that's the part of the brain that controls higher level thinking and thought, and some of the actions that we tend to endure as human beings. So higher level thinking, from the triune brain concept, that falls in the area of the neocortex, and then you have the neocortex, the limbic brain, and then the reptilian, the lizard brain, which is a little bit down. So but the prefrontal cortex is what we really want to talk about, because that's the one that controls our actions and our impulsiveness and how we behave around people. So if there is a problem with your prefrontal cortex, you can easily have a problem with your self-control and your ability to have mind control, discipline, and ultimately the superpower that we're here to talk about. So to better understand this, there was an incident that happened in the scientific journals a couple of years back, or maybe a century or so, many centuries back. And this really shed light into this idea of the power of the prefrontal cortex in terms of controlling our desires, our emotions, our impulsiveness, and things like that. So if you understand that, you can really understand how to take control of that and use it to your advantage. So there is this guy called Phoenix Gage. Phoenix Gage was a foreman. He used to work on the railroads back in the day. I think that was in the United States. And on one day, he had a really bad accident, something that you don't want to have when you're going to work. But Phoenix, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, Phoenix Gage had this really bad accident. And what happened was, as he was walking, a rod went through his head and through his brain and hit his front brain, where we have the prefrontal cortex here in his brain. And that really caused a lot of problems. But believe it or not, the story might seem sad, but he survived. So at least we know that he survived, and that was great. But When Phoenix survived, that was in 1848, somewhere in 1848. It was a 7-inch rod that went into his brain and damaged his prefrontal cortex. Even though he survived, he changed as a person. So the doctor's report before the accident had indicated that Phoenix was a very gentle, mature person that was physically and psychologically well and strong. But after the incident, when his prefrontal cortex was damaged because of the rod, and I think the rod stayed in his brain, or it was taken out and the brain was scared, I'm not quite sure of the details, but he became a different person. And the reports were he became more impulsive, he didn't have self-control, he just indulged himself in things. And the correlation to that was because he lost his prefrontal cortex, he kind of lost a lot of that self-control. So what does that mean, and how can you apply that to your life? In as much as that situation is sad, it does shed a lot of light in terms of the power of the prefrontal cortex. And if you really want to build and maintain your self-control, you want to keep this in check. You don't want to have this being damaged or going out of control. So one of the things that excuse me, you don't want this being damaged or going out of control. Now, one of the things that, or what are the things that can damage your prefrontal cortex or make it go out of control, that will cause you to lose your willpower, your mind power, your discipline, and the superpower that you have? The list here can be very long, but these are things that tempt us. These are temptations. These are things that you might be doing them intentionally or not intentionally, but either way, it does have an impact. And if you understand that impact, you can start understanding how to take that into your life, either to mitigate the problems or to understand how you can deal with it. So what are those things? Being drunk. Being drunk, of course, guess what? It affects your prefrontal cortex. You lose your ability to make right decisions, and you start being impulsive, you start losing attention, and you basically, it just causes a lot of trouble. So not just being drunk, any mind altering substance, it could be and again, I'm not trying to do this to be political or talk about weed versus drugs and things like that, but basically anything that controls the mind, the state of the mind from its equilibrium, has an impact in terms of your ability to maintain your goals, for being disciplined, for having a strong willpower, which ultimately go into your superpower. Willpower, superpower. That's the whole thing we're talking about. Now, or being sleep deprived. You know, sleep deprivation is a form of torture, because people know that if they deprive you of sleep, you lose all your inhibitions, you lose all your ability to have self-control, and so you go out and you start doing things, or you say things, or you can give out secrets that you did not intend to give out. And that's why political prisoners or prisoners of war, one of the forms of torture, you hear them, they were tortured by being sleep deprived, and then they were interrogated, because now you want to sleep, and then you start saying everything that you want, and that's how they can get secrets out of political prisoners. Or just being not in shape. Here I wrote obese, but that's not just about obesity. It's also about being in a physical condition that allows you to be optimal. So overweight or eating bad, the diet and all those things, when they affect the chemical balance in your body, that takes away from you being able to have the discipline, mind control, and the willpower, superpower that can allow you to make the right decisions, plan and work towards your goals. So these are the things that we really want to avoid. Things that alter the state of the mind: being drunk, taking alcohol, taking drugs and substances that alternate the state of the body. Those things we want to avoid. Sleep well, getting rest, meditating so your mind can calm down a little bit, and just taking care of your health, eating right, and making sure that you take care of the things that go into your body, because those actions are the things that allow your prefrontal cortex to not be destroyed. Guess what? The brain literally gets destroyed by alcohol. You know, let me share a story here, and I don't know if it's scientifically true, but this might have an impact on people. At least it did for me when I heard about it. Now, it was this idea of for people who drink alcohol and they have headaches. You might be related to it. We call it hangover. There might be different names for it. So you go out, you drink alcohol, and you wake up the next morning and your head is just like going like, you know, the siren of a firefighter, right? Just blowing at you. And so one of the explanations for that, again, I'm not a scientist here or a doctor or anything, but One of the explanations I've heard for that is what happens is alcohol dehydrates your body. So when you drink alcohol, it literally dehydrates your body. That's why you have to pee a lot when you drink alcohol. So what happens by dehydrating the body, you know, if you can think about the brain, it sits in the skull. So when that dehydration occurs, it occurs on the brain too. That's why, of course, you're drunk, because it goes up to your brain. It causes your brain to shrink. If you dehydrate something, guess what? There's less water there, and what does it do? It shrinks. So that shrinkage of your brain literally sitting in your skull, the brain here, my drawing of a brain, sitting in your skull and shrinking, literally shrinking, because it's losing water and dehydrating. That's what causes headaches. So if you can just imagine that this organ, the most vital, delicate organ that makes us who we are, is shrinking because of something that we've put in there, and it's expanding and shrinking and it's expanding. Just guess how much damage that's doing to the brain. You know, again, I'm not saying that no alcohol, don't drink, nothing like that. I do get a couple of drinks in social situations, but you have to understand that it does come with consequences. Like in the Western world, like where there is snow, you know, where temperature changes a lot and something shrinks and expands, either the road or concrete or structures that shrink and expand, they eventually get damaged. And so by having your brain go through all that cycle, there is inevitable damage to the prefrontal cortex, and that's why people start losing their short-term memory. They start having a lot of effects because the short-term memory is affected by all the substances that goes in. So to develop and keep that superpower that we're talking about here in this lecture, we have to be aware of what we put in our body and how we treat our brain. It's not just a matter of being in a Zen state and just believing and meditating to have self-control. There is also physical and physiological attributes to this, or dimensions to this, and you have to take care of that. Being mentally strong is not just about believing that you're strong, right? If you are putting the wrong things into your body, it affects your prefrontal cortex, and you stop making the right decisions and not having the discipline, you lose track of that superpower, which is something we want to avoid. One of the things that they tell people who want to lose weight is don't have food in your house that would tempt you to eat. So if you're trying to lose weight, there's no point buying a bunch of candy and putting in your cabinet, because guess what? You'll be depleting your willpower to go eat, to not eat that candy, which you could have taken that willpower or taken the willpower to do something else. So number one here, avoid temptations. Number two, plan ahead. Plan ahead. A lot of people walk around and then they wait for a situation and then they have to decide what to do in that situation. A better approach, and there are a lot of literature around this, is if you plan what your actions should be in any situations, in that when that situation comes up, you're not worrying about your willpower, applying willpower to decide that situation, because you already have a plan. So for example, and this is something that I use, one of the things that I apply to my life is I don't eat pizzas after 10 p.m. or something like that, right? So I know after 10 p.m. I don't eat pizzas. It's not even a question. I don't have to decide whether I eat pizza or not, because after 10 p.m., guess what? I might have a couple of drinks, and if you have those drinks, it affects your inhibitions and your self-control, and guess what? You tend to eat pizzas. But if you've made it a rule, a plan, after 10 p.m., no pizza. So it's that time the temptations is not even there anymore, because if I see pizza after 10 p.m., I don't even have to decide. I don't even have to be going back and forth if I should eat it. I just know, don't eat pizza. But if I left the situation without a plan to say, well, we'll see, I'll decide. When the situation comes, I'll decide. 10 p.m. reaches, and you've had a couple of drinks, and you start deciding that pizza, no pizza, pizza, no pizza. And then you look at it and say, oh yeah, that pizza looks really good, right? Let me just make this one exception. You make the exception and you eat that pizza. And then night after night, you keep making the exception. And that's how you can achieve your goals of losing weight, because there wasn't a plan to begin with. So going to the rule number two, or understanding number two, plan ahead. Number three, practice using self-control. Now, I think this might contradict with avoiding temptations, but not really. It goes to that idea of muscles. If you use your muscles, they grow. If you don't use it, they die. They degenerate. So you want to practice self-control. You don't just want to have self-control. You want to be able to practice it. So you want to sometimes challenge yourself. Put yourself in a position where you walk into a pizza factory and you can hear the smell of the pizza, and your goal is to lose weight. and you walk out without eating the pizza, and then you say to yourself, yes, I did it. Excuse me, am I making noise? And then you say to yourself, yes, I did it, right? Because you're training your mind. And if you can do that once in a while, I mean, you don't want to take it into extremes, but if you can do that once in a while, the next time you walk into a pizza place, it will just be normal to you because you've done that and come out without eating pizza, so it won't be a surprise to you. So the whole idea is, don't necessarily run away from your temptations. Embrace them with the confidence that they cannot affect you, and you do it gradually, right? Do it gradually. So for example, you can walk, say your goal is to read more, or your goal is to not drink, or your goal is to quit smoking, or your goal is to have better relationships. Start small, right? If you know something is a trigger for you, if you know that a particular smell or a particular candy is a trigger for you to overeat, start small. Put the candy and not eat, or put the candy and eat just half of what you normally eat, and then put the candy and eat just a quarter of what you normally eat, and keep doing that until you can see the candy and decide not to eat at all. It takes training, it takes practice. It's just like running. You go out to run, you can't just wake up and run 100 miles, right? You can start running 3 miles and 5 miles and then 10 miles and then maybe a marathon and then maybe 2 marathons, right? And you can keep going and going. So practice using your willpower, and that's practice using self-control. And then last but not least, focus on your goals, right? Because all this doesn't matter if you don't have goals that you want to focus on. There is a book, Start with the End in Mind. I think that's by Simon Sinek, something like that. He says, always have the end in mind. If you know where your objective is, all the distractions around you will not matter, because willpower, mind control, discipline will come naturally. So all of these things that we're practicing here is for you to get towards your goal. Whether your goal is to finish school, is to have a good career, is to make more money, is to lose weight. If you have that goal, say my goal is to lose 50 pounds, then it's a lot easier to do all these things because you have a goal. But without a goal, then everything becomes a distraction and you can really get nowhere. So now guys, we've kind of gone through the map, we've kind of gone through the board. It's a lot of things that we want to talk about, but the end result of this is that we want to take advantage of this superpower, willpower, discipline, mind control, whatever we call it, to achieve the things that we want to achieve in our life. Control the way we eat food, control our money so that we can maybe make more money if we want to make more money, or we can spend our money wisely if that's what we want to achieve. We can have a better health, we can be healthy, we can have the weight that we want, we can look the way we want to look, we can go out and do the things that we want to do, and we can have fulfilling relationships in our lives, in our career, in our interactions with people. So mind control, if it's not helping you achieve any end goal in mind, then it might really be, what's the point, right? You might ask, what's the point of doing all this, or what is the point of focusing on this? And the last thing that I want to leave you with is one saying here, and it's from a Japanese, it's from the Japanese culture, which is Kaizen, which is that idea of incremental improvement. So you might be in a position where you're looking at all of this and feeling overwhelmed and saying, but that's a lot, like where do I even start? I don't even know where to begin. It's too much. You've given me too much information. Yes, I understand. I understand that not everybody starts off by flying. You might have to crawl and walk and run before you think about flying. And so Kaizen is a really important concept that I'll recommend people, if you're trying to begin the journey of building your strong willpower, taking both the psychological and the philosophical or the physiological understanding of it, to don't think you have to start all at the same time. You can start small, make incremental updates, get better incrementally, and with time, you will be a willpower master house with a superpower, right? They say, one of my favorite quotes is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. If you want to go 1,000 miles, you have to take that first step. That first step, you might not have a lot of willpower. You might still fall weak. You might still fall into the temptations, but you just have to start and then just keep making progress. So what is your progress for this day? What is your progress for, not this day even, what's your progress for this hour, this particular hour? Are you watching TV and you can't get read out of it? You don't have the willpower to do it? Maybe cut it down a little bit. Instead of just quitting entirely, maybe reduce it. Your watch time from maybe 6 hours a day to 5 hours to 4. Eventually, you find yourself not watching a lot of TVs. Maybe you want to read more books. So maybe start with reading one page or one paragraph of your favorite book, and then increasing it. So one day you read just one paragraph, and then you find yourself reading an entire chapter, and then you find yourself reading an entire book or section, or you find yourself reading a couple of books within a day or a month or a week. But you have to start small and then grow your way. So Kaizen is a philosophy that we want to apply as on this whole board. So that as we go out and we're developing that idea of having strong willpower, we don't get overwhelmed, because if you get overwhelmed, guess what? You just fall behind. You just give up, and giving up is not what we want. So Kaizen, a Japanese philosophy, I think that's really what helped Toyota to become one of the best. Well, at least a couple of decades ago, one of the best car companies in the world, with safety and just their efficiency in manufacturing, because they were laser focused on the idea of incremental improvements. So leveraging this Kaizen philosophy, we can develop willpower, and with willpower we have the superpower, and with the superpower, guys, you can achieve whatever it is you want to achieve in life. And now, to leave you with another mindset and another little story here, you can see we have a lot of those stories, which is having a shark mindset, because Kaizen would allow you to have the shark mindset so that you can stay the course when things go wrong. And this shark mindset is something that falls into the concept of learned helplessness. A lot of people believe that in as much as I've given so much information on this board, so much, people would say, but I just can't. I know I don't have the willpower. They just believe that they don't, that they are helpless. And if that's you, bear with me, you're not. You can do it. You can do it. And it comes with understanding this experiment that was done with sharks. So what the scientists did was, they took a shark, they put it in a big pond of water. It was a controlled scenario, but they put it in a pond. They put the shark in, and they put in a bunch of little fish. What did the shark do? The shark mindset, it went out, ate all the fish, and was just devouring them, doing what a shark does. So what the scientists did was, they put the shark now, instead of just putting the fish, they put a clear glass in the pond, and then they put the little fish, they put the fish on this other side. Guess what? The shark, again, with the shark mindset, attack, let's go, let's get some food, let's eat, right? So the shark went out, went to get the fish, did not realize that there was a glass separating them, boom, hit the head. Right, and the shark was like, what the heck is going on here? I want to get this fish. So the shark again goes to eat the fish, hit the head. Did that for like so many times, and the shark kind of gave up and just believed that he couldn't get the fish. And then sooner or later, they saw the shark just sitting there, and the fish was just swimming, and the shark just did not want to do anything with the fish. The shark had given up. And even when the scientists took out the glass thing, the shark still would not go after the fish, because of learned helplessness. The shark had learned that he couldn't, or she, or whatever it is, however you describe sharks, that they cannot get that fish, and so they gave up. That helplessness is not what sharks are. That was learned. The shark simply learned that. The shark was put in a position where they learned how to be helpless. Now, I'm not saying that us human beings are put in situations where we learn how to be helpless, but for one reason or another, we might find ourselves in situations where we begin to believe that we don't even have a chance to achieve the things that we want to do, because we quit, because we give up, because we do drugs, because things in our lives are not going well, and we believe that we cannot even start this because we don't have the discipline to see it through, to see it to the end. Maybe that has been the situation in the past. Maybe that's something that used to occur in your life in the past. But like I said, or like this experiment says, it's not who you are. Sharks have a different mindset. You have a different mindset, and you can achieve it. But it takes you using the Kaizen philosophy, building step by step, and eventually, with little to no time, you can begin to be the true person that you are. The person with a superpower, the person that says, if I want to achieve something, if you believe that you want to achieve something, you can achieve it. There's nothing as strong as a mind that is made up. Once you make up your mind, you have a superpower. And even the Spider-Man and all those people who claim to be Superman, they're not you. You have your own superpower. You can be a Superman, you can be a Superwoman, or super whatever you want to be. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you like this video. Like I said, this was a great video. With a lot of things. I hope you have a lot of takeaways. I'm going to leave a link below in this video with a lot of the things that we talked about. So I might not necessarily correlate them to every single study, but if you click on those links, you will see every study that I'm referencing here as well. And this video too will be indexed with Really AI, so there'll be a link below. So if you want to get more deep insights for this video, get the extension, and that allows you to see more in this video. I think there's translation to many different languages, and there's a lot more. And if you like the extension, guys, share it so that more people can use it, install the extension, and they can see more behind the scenes. That's using artificial intelligence to analyze all of the things that we've talked about here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.